Karoline thought making fun of Jasmine Crockett's mother would earn her a few laughs until Jasmine shared a story so strong it left Karoline walking off stage. There were 8 chairs lined up on stage that day in Austin. Each seat was filled, each speaker chosen with care. It was a youth policy forum titled Tomorrow's Leaders, Today's Choices, hosted by a local think tank and streamed live across 3 platforms. The panel brought together both bold young voices and seasoned thinkers. It was meant to spark dialogue, highlight different visions, maybe even create a viral moment. Jasmine Crockett sat near the middle, legs crossed, sharp blazer on, notes in hand, though untouched. She did not rely on scripts. She usually did not have to. Jasmine was known for staying calm and sharp. She had learned long ago that being the only black woman in a room did not mean she had to be the loudest. It meant she had to be impossible to ignore. To her left was Karoline Leavitt, a younger panelist, clearly keen to stand out. She was known for catchy, provocative lines meant to stir reactions. Her smile almost dared someone to argue back. Not exactly disrespectful, but always flirting with the boundary, especially when cameras were around. The moderator, a silver-haired radio host from Waco, began with wide questions. Education reform, youth violence, the role of social media. Most answers were standard phrases like, "We need to start the conversation," and "Let's get everyone at the table." Then came a shift. "We've discussed young people," the moderator said, "but what about the values they receive? Who gives them those? What did your parents teach you about leadership?" It was a simple question, but those kinds of questions hit differently when identity is part of the mix. Karoline spoke up first. "I come from tough roots," she said with a slight laugh. "My parents run a small business back in New Hampshire. They taught me to speak up and never feel sorry for it." Jasmine stayed still. She already sensed where this was headed. Then came the moment. Karoline turned to Jasmine, and with a grin that stopped short of her eyes, said, "So Jasmine, where's your mom from? Africa?" The room shifted. It did not burst into laughter. Not really. There were a few uneasy chuckles, the kind people give when they are not sure if they should laugh or feel uncomfortable. One panelist stared at the floor. The moderator blinked, unsure if he should step in. One camera zoomed in a bit, sensing a moment. Jasmine did not move. She slowly turned to Karoline, not to attack her, not yet, but to look at her, truly see her. Not the polished version for the camera, but the person who thought that comment was light enough to drop in a room full of journalists, students, and officials. But before Jasmine could say anything, something unexpected happened. From the very back of the room, past the crowd, the tech tables, and camera crews, a woman stood up. She had been seated quietly, hands resting in her lap, a maroon shawl draped over her shoulders, silver strands in her hair. She had gone mostly unnoticed before. She had not needed attention. She had not spoken, had not stared. She simply stood, her chin lifted, and her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Now, everyone looked not at Karoline, not at Jasmine, but at the woman standing quietly in the back. Jasmine did not turn. She already knew. That was her mother, the same woman who sat through every high school debate meeting, who once held down 3 jobs, and still pressed her daughter's shirts at 2 in the morning. The woman who once told her, "Make them hear you, without raising your voice." The silence continued. Karoline, now visibly uncomfortable, adjusted her seat and cleared her throat. Jasmine calmly picked up the mic. It was the first time her voice had entered the room that night, but what she said would quiet every whisper and make Karoline regret what she had said. You could feel the change in the room. Like the temperature had dropped, though the air had not shifted. It was not just silence. It was a tension, sharp, weighty, and real. People were still watching Jasmine's mother, still standing, still silent. No reaction, no movement, just standing there, like a page in history that had stepped into the present. Jasmine raised the mic and spoke slowly. "I could answer your question," she said, "but doing that would mean accepting the way you asked it." Karoline shifted again. The smile she wore had faded. Now, her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "You asked where my mother is from," Jasmine continued, calm and direct. "Not because you care about her story, but because you hoped it would make mine smaller." The moderator stayed quiet. He knew better than to interrupt now. She is from Tuskegee, Alabama, Jasmine said, locking eyes with Karoline. Not Africa. But even if she were, I would say that with the same pride. But you did not ask because you wanted to know. You asked because you assumed she had no place in this room. Now, everyone was paying attention, not casually. They leaned forward, eyes fixed. Some had even stopped blinking. She cleaned homes in high school to help feed her younger siblings, Jasmine went on. She worked in a diner where the owner made her use the back door. She raised me while working overnight as a nurse and still showed up to every PTA meeting. A soft hum came from someone in the crowd. And she is right there, Jasmine added, finally turning toward the back. Standing, all eyes followed hers. Her mother did not wave, did not move. She stood still, proud. That woman, Jasmine said, her voice now firmer, taught me that dignity does not need a stage or a microphone or even a reply. Karoline gave a nervous laugh to late and completely offbeat. My mother, Jasmine said, went through what she did so I could sit in this chair today, so I could answer ignorant questions with true stories, so I could remind you and everyone watching that who we are is not shaped by our zip code or skin color or how well we speak to people who already made up their minds. She paused, letting it settle. She is not from Africa. She is from strength. There was a quiet moment. That is when it struck the room. This was not a comeback. It was not about getting even. It was clarity, the kind that removes filters and leaves only what is real. The kind that does not need to be loud to make an impact. Karoline blinked fast. She reached for her water bottle, missed, bumped it slightly. A soft clink echoed against the metal table. She tried to laugh again, but it fell flat. It was not harshness that silenced Karoline. It was the absence of it. Jasmine had not gone after her, she had simply told the truth. And the truth did not need to be harsh to be powerful. One panelist, an older woman from Fort Worth, looked toward Jasmine and gave her a slow, almost invisible nod. Not of agreement, but of respect. The kind that says, "You earned that." The moderator, sensing a shift, tried to move forward. "Thank you for sharing, Congresswoman. I think there's," but he did not finish, because Jasmine leaned in again. She was not finished. Now that the silence had spoken, she needed to explain why moments like this still matter in rooms like this. Jasmine did not lean back. She did not wait to see if the moderator would move on. She kept her hand wrapped around the mic, firm, not forceful, just steady. "You know," she said, clearly, just loud enough to carry. "People love using the word diversity on panels like this, especially when cameras are around. They want us here, but they do not want to be changed by what we bring." She was no longer speaking to Karoline. Now, her words were for the audience. Students, educators, policy experts. Some leaned forward. Some stared without blinking. The room had gone still. And when you ask a question like that, Jasmine said, "You're not just trying to be clever. You are testing limits, seeing what you can get away with, because you think I will not answer in a way that makes you uncomfortable." Her voice stayed calm, but her words landed deeply. They lingered. "My mother used to tell me your silence will be misunderstood more than your voice will ever be respected. But she also told me choose your moment. Make it matter." A young man in the front row, probably a college student, nodded slowly. He turned to the person next to him and whispered, "This is real." Jasmine continued, "I am not here so people will like me. I am not here to keep everyone at ease. I am here because I earned it. And my mother, she gave up so much for it. So when someone tries to reduce her life to a joke, I cannot stay quiet." She looked at Karoline briefly. "But let me tell you something about the woman back there. She did not grow up with much, but she had a backbone like steel. She raised me in a home where we did not always have heat in the winter, but we had books, we had values, we had tough conversations, not always polite, but always honest." She turned back to the crowd. "That is what leadership looks like. Not tweets, not clever remarks, but knowing when to speak and knowing when silence says more." Someone clapped. Just one. Then a few more followed. It was not loud. It was not planned, but it was genuine, a soft wave of agreement. Still, Jasmine raised her hand gently. "Do not clap for me," she said. "Clap for her. She is why I am here, and she never had to tear anyone down to lift herself up." Now, The focus returned to the woman in the back. She still had not moved, but her presence felt different now. Not just strong, almost sacred. Jasmine's voice grew softer. She told me stories about walking miles to get to school, about working at 15 and sending part of her pay to her grandmother, about men who doubted her, and women who tried to limit her, but she always showed up. Karoline still had not spoken. Her face gave nothing away now. Not anger, not pride, just uncertainty, like someone realizing they had stepped into something far bigger than they expected. And that, Jasmine said, is what young people need right now. Not just policies and programs and promises, but real example. People who stand firm, even when others try to reduce them. People who carry history without bitterness. She finally leaned back just slightly. "I'd not come here to teach anyone a lesson," she said. "But sometimes, lessons arrive whether you are ready or not." But the most powerful part of the night was not what Jasmine had already said. It was what she was about to reveal about her mother's past. Something no one in the room saw coming. Jasmine finally sat back. She rested her voice. The mic was still in her hand, but she did not speak. Not because she had nothing left to say, but because the story she was about to share needed silence around it. She looked at her mother, still standing. "She's quiet now," Jasmine said, "but she has not always been." A few more people leaned in. They were not ready to move past this moment. It felt like someone had opened a door you never realized had been locked. "My mother," Jasmine said. "Her name is Althea Josephine Grant. She grew up in Tuskegee during the 1960s. She went to a school where all her textbooks were hand-me-downs from the white school across town. She once told Jasmine about a book she got in 3rd grade. Inside, in faded ink, it said, 'Property of Jefferson High.' Its pages were torn. Some answers had already been written in. She did not complain," Jasmine said. She read it twice. The room grew quiet. She was 12 when she watched her father, my grandfather, get turned away from voting. Not because he was ineligible, but because they told him the polls were closed. They were not. Jasmine looked down briefly, then looked back up. "She never forgot that," she said. "She told me, 'You'll vote for both of us someday.'" Her voice cracked slightly, just enough to feel real. But she kept going. At 16, she marched in Montgomery. Not to make headlines, she marched because the cafeteria at her school ran out of milk for the black students 3 times a week, while the white school nearby threw out extra cartons. She told me, "That is reason enough to march." No one in the audience was shifting anymore. They were still. Jasmine rested the mic on her lap for a moment, then picked it up again carefully. "He married young. My father served in the army. He passed away when I was 8. She never remarried. Never had time. She worked. Always worked nights, weekends. You know how people say single mothers are strong? It's a compliment." She paused briefly. It wasn't strength she picked. It was survival. She glanced at Karoline for just a second. "That woman back there," Jasmine said, "never asked for attention. She was never recognized. She didn't do it for applause. She did it because she knew the world was not designed for someone like her to succeed. But she was determined to give her daughter a fair shot anyway." To his credit, the moderator said nothing. He let her speak. "She taught me how to check the oil in a car, how to make an argument hold up in a room full of critics. She once said to me, 'Always tell your story before someone else tries to tell it for you.' That's why I'm speaking now." She paused again, this time not for effect, but for space. "I know what it feels like when someone thinks they're making a harmless joke," Jasmine continued. "They toss it out and wait to see if you react. And if you don't, they try to make you feel like you're the one who's wrong for not laughing. But we've done that too long. We've let it go, laughed it off, dimmed ourselves to keep the peace." Jasmine's eyes met her mother's, and her mother moved just slightly. She lowered her head, not in agreement, in understanding. "I come from a woman who knew how to fight quietly," Jasmine said, "who understood that sometimes the boldest act is just to show up fully herself. No apologies." The audience stayed focused on her. Even those who had come expecting just politics were now drawn into something far deeper. "She never wanted me to be angry," Jasmine added. "She wanted me to be clear about who I am, where I come from, and why I will never let People like you, she gestured gently toward Karoline, try to reduce my story for a laugh. But Jasmine was no longer speaking just for herself. What came next would show everyone in that room what happens when truth is passed down quietly, but powerfully through generations. Jasmine did not rush. She adjusted the mic again. Let her last line settle. She had brought the room into her mother's life, without guilt, without asking for sympathy. And now, she was ready to shift again. This time, to something deeper. There's this idea, she said steadily, that ignorance should be excused when it's disguised as a joke. She turned fully to Karoline now. Some people call it humor, sarcasm. They say, relax. It's not that serious. But it is. It always is. Because people like my mother lived through the damage of other people's jokes. Karoline tried to meet Jasmine's eyes, then looked away. She was no longer smiling. I have been in rooms, Jasmine continued, where men in suits asked where I learned to speak so well. I've sat at dinners where someone called my braids urban chic, and I had to decide, do I speak up, or do I stay quiet and keep things calm? She scanned the room, slowly, carefully. We make that choice all the time, especially those of us who were taught as children to pick our battles. But I've learned something: silence is not peace. It is permission. Someone from the back quietly said, that is it. Jasmine leaned in a little. When you asked where my mother is from, she said, looking at Karoline, you were not really looking for a real answer. You were hoping I would react, give you a moment you could cut and share later, something to make you seem bold. She let that thought sit in the air. But saying something offensive and waiting for attention is not bold. Bold is when you stand behind your words even when they fall flat. And this one did. There was a stir in the audience. Some people turned toward Karoline. Others looked away. I am not here to cancel you, Jasmine continued, calm and clear. I am not chasing points. I do not even need your apology. What we need is for you to realize that your joke landed on a history that does not belong to you. Karoline shifted in her seat. Her hands tightened. She looked at the moderator, then quickly dropped her eyes back to her notes. Though it was obvious she was not reading. You know what is difficult? Jasmine asked the room. Raising a daughter in a world that claims to be past racism, but still double-checks your name on a job form. You know what is even harder? Watching someone turn your mother's life into a joke in front of strangers and cameras, just to provoke a reaction. The room remained silent. No one moved. She did not come today to be noticed, Jasmine added, briefly glancing toward the back. But now that she is standing, I want you all to remember that. A woman who never said a word, yet still said everything. There was something steady in Jasmine's voice, not gentle, just certain. You can disagree with my views, that is part of this space, and I welcome it. But when you mock someone's background, when you turn their heritage into a punchline, you are not having a debate. You are sending people like me a message that we still need to justify our place here. One of the panelists, a policy expert from San Diego, quietly set down his microphone. He did not interrupt. He was simply making space. I have learned, Jasmine said. You do not have to speak louder to stand firm. You do not have to fire back to take back your ground. You just tell the truth and let it land where it should. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Not because she was upset, but because something within her had shifted. I am not here to make you feel guilty, Jasmine said directly to Karoline. But I do hope you feel something. Because if you don't, then nothing has changed. But Jasmine still had more to say. What she said next would draw a line between those who just show up for appearances and those who show up for actual effort. The silence now was different. Not just polite, it carried weight. Like no one wanted to break it. Jasmine had not raised her voice or used any forceful tone. Yet she had taken full command of the room just by speaking clearly and truthfully. Even the moderator, who probably had a list of follow-ups ready, remained still, his pen paused. Karoline sat frozen. The confident smile she had worn earlier had faded. Now, all that was left was uncertainty. She glanced around the room, maybe looking for support, but there was none. The usual confidence she carried did not hold up against what Jasmine brought. Jasmine leaned back a bit, not with pride, and not because she was done. She looked again at her mother. Althea was still standing, her posture unchanged, and somehow, her quiet presence had become the emotional center of the entire event. "Some of you may think I am being overly sensitive," Jasmine said, scanning the room, "that I should have laughed and let it go, but that is what people expect. That is how things get passed on, never questioned." This time, a few people nodded in agreement. They were not just watching anymore. They were now fully engaged. You could see it in how closely they listened, how their eyes stayed locked on her every word. "I have spent years walking into rooms like this," she said, "knowing I would need to put in twice the effort just to be seen as capable. And even then, I had to keep smiling through the quiet remarks, the hidden jabs, and the compliments that were not really compliments." Jasmine paused for a moment, letting that truth settle in the room. "I do not want sympathy, and I am not asking for applause. I want responsibility. I want honesty about what happens when humor carries a deeper impact." Karoline picked up her pen, likely to appear focused, but everyone in the room noticed her. "That is what happens when you are used to shaping the story. Sitting still becomes difficult when you are no longer in control of it." Someone in the crowd slowly raised a phone to record, not for attention, but because they sensed this was something worth remembering. A young woman by the aisle leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That is real leadership." Jasmine looked toward the policy expert from San Diego, the one who had gently set his mic down earlier. "You do not need to be loud to shift a space," she said. "You just need to stand behind your words and understand what they carry." She turned back to Karoline, her voice calm but steady. "I'm not here asking for an apology. That would be too simple. I'm asking you to consider the influence you have and how you use it. One comment from you can either push old ideas further or help break them apart." Karoline did not reply. She gave a small nod, but it felt more like habit than agreement-like. She realized the moment had moved on without her. The moderator cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the discussion. "Let us open the floor for audience questions," he said. But Jasmine leaned forward again. "Before we do," she said, "I want to say one last thing." The moderator leaned back. The room waited. "We often talk about looking ahead," Jasmine said. "We tell young people to speak up and take the lead. But what are we showing them if, once they enter these spaces, we still trap them with ignorance masked as jokes?" That hit harder than anything before. This time, a few people clapped louder than before. Others stayed quiet, still thinking. "We cannot keep saying, 'You can become anything,' while laughing at where people come from. That is not leadership. That is just performance." She placed the microphone down, not out of defeat, but as if to mark the end of her point, like a final line in a well-written piece. But the moment was not over. What Karoline did next said more than words ever could. For the first time in nearly an hour, she looked like she wanted to disappear. Her arms folded across her chest, gripping her elbows tightly, almost like a shield. Jasmine had not raised her voice. She had not insulted her, but somehow, that made it even more uncomfortable. People were not seeing Karoline as a rival. They were seeing her as a reminder of how quickly someone can speak without thinking, joke without caring, and strike at something important without realizing the damage. She reached for her water bottle. Her hand shook just a little as she opened the cap and took a sip, perhaps hoping to pause the moment. But it had already passed her. Jasmine had spoken her truth. There was no need to push further. Her words had landed exactly where they needed to. Now, the silence around Karoline spoke louder than anything else. The moderator tried to continue as usual. "All right, we will take a few questions from the audience," he said, his tone less firm than before. A woman in the crowd raised her hand, but the attention had already shifted. Everyone was watching Karoline. She stood up slowly, adjusted her blazer, and brushed her hair behind one ear. She did not look upset, at least not on the outside, but her face had changed now, unreadable, like she was trying to find a quiet way out. But realizing it was already too late, she leaned toward the moderator and whispered something. He nodded. That was when people knew she was leaving. No apology, no explanation. She simply gathered her things, her notes, her phone, her half-finished water, and walked toward the side stairs. Nobody stopped her. Nobody called out. They just watched. Even the camera followed her for a second, then turned back toward the panel, unsure if the story had left with her or was only beginning. Jasmine did not react. She did not look in Karoline's direction. Her eyes stayed on the crowd, the students in the second row, and her mother still standing quietly at the back like a guardian. Karoline made her way down the steps. Her heels hit the floor louder than she intended, sharp, quick sounds that echoed more than they should have. She exited through the left door, not in a rush, not slamming it, just gone. Someone in the audience whispered, "Wow." Another person said, "She really left," but no one followed her. The moment just stayed behind, like the faint smell after a match goes out. The moderator cleared his throat again, sounding less confident this time. "Let's move on to the next question." A young woman, likely 19, stood up slowly with a notebook in her hand. "This question is for Congresswoman Crockett," she said. "How do you stay grounded when it is clear that you have been targeted?" Jasmine held her gaze for a moment. She did not rush to speak. "I remember who I am really speaking to," she said. "It is not always the person who made the remark. Sometimes it is the people in the room, wondering what they would do in my place. Sometimes, it is the young woman in the crowd asking tough questions. That is who I speak to." She gave a soft smile. "That is how I stay grounded. I speak through it, not because of it." There was a round of light clapping, a few quiet nods, and this time no one shifted uncomfortably. Althea, Jasmine's mother, finally sat back down slowly, as if the moment had passed and the quiet burden she had carried all evening could now ease. Jasmine met her eyes and gave a small nod just for her. A silent understanding between women who had seen enough of these moments to know when one truly landed, but the most powerful moment still waited. As the audience continued with more questions, Jasmine's final message would tie it all together, and it would not just belong to her. The mood in the room had shifted. You could feel it in how people now breathed more calmly, in how the questions became more real and less performative. Something had changed. A college senior stood next. Her voice was unsteady, but she kept going. "I just want to say, I have never seen anyone handle a situation like that with so much grace," she said. "I did not grow up seeing women who look like me speak like that. So thank you." Jasmine did not smile right away. She inhaled deeply, eyes warm and steady. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "But do not thank me for doing something that should never have been necessary in the first place." That statement hit deeply. No one clapped this time, they just let it sit. Jasmine glanced at her hands, then back at the audience. "I have been on panels where people talked over me, dismissed me, or called me articulate like it was unexpected," she said. "But what I want young people to know is this: you do not have to meet ignorance with anger. You do not even have to respond to it the same way. Just keep showing up as your true self without apology." She turned to the moderator now, addressing the room more broadly. "We talk about leadership like it has a look, like it wears a suit, speaks a certain way, or comes with a certain background. But most of the strongest leaders I know never had a platform. They led from their kitchens, from church vans, from hospital break rooms and library steps. They led without being told to." Her voice was calm now, grounded, as if bringing the plane safely in. "My mother never had a college degree," Jasmine said, glancing once more to the back. "But she gave me what no degree could ever teach: discipline, self-respect, and the strength to stand in rooms not made for me and still take up space." People began to nod again. Some whispered to each other. Others stared straight ahead, locked into every word. And to every young person listening, she continued, "Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for approval. Just show up. Show up for your story. Show up for your truth. And when someone tries to shrink you into a stereotype, you do not have to raise your voice. Just tell the truth, and tell it loud enough to be remembered." Then came a pause, and for the first time that evening, Jasmine's mother spoke. She did not raise her voice. She did not need a mic. Yet the entire room heard her clearly. "She was born with a voice," Althea said. "I just made sure she never forgot how to use it." It was only one line, but it struck deep. A few people gasped. Some placed their hands on their chests. Eyes began to fill, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Jasmine smiled then, fully, freely. She looked toward her mother with what could only be described as deep respect. "I never forgot," she said softly, The moderator cleared his throat once again, but this time he said nothing. He just nodded at Jasmine, silently giving the moment to her. She leaned into the mic for one last sentence. This was not about politics, she said. This was about legacy and the kind of world we want to leave behind. One where respect is not earned with silence, and being visible does not mean being quiet. The crowd rose not suddenly, but as one, not because they were asked, but because they understood, but because they sensed something meaningful had just taken place. The applause began not loud, not rushed, but genuine and steady. Jasmine stepped back while her mother slowly moved down the side aisle, her pace calm and deliberate. When they reached one another near the edge of the stage, they shared a quick, firm hug, no need for words. Yet before the lights faded and the cameras stopped recording, one last reflection would make this more than just a powerful moment. It would become a lasting message. The crowd exited slowly. No one hurried out. No one glanced at their phones. People stood around in the aisles, quietly talking, eyes still drawn toward the stage, as if they were trying to hold on to what they had just witnessed. The tech team at the back dimmed the lights, gradually, giving the space time to settle. Panelists quietly packed up their papers. Some exchanged handshakes. Others left quietly, lost in thought. But Jasmine remained in place. She stood by the edge of the stage next to her mother, hands touching briefly. It was not done for show or the cameras. It was just two women, one who had paved the way, and another who stood tall when it mattered most. A student journalist stepped forward carefully, a book ready, her voice hesitant. "May I ask you one quick question, Congresswoman?" Jasmine turned with the same calm presence. "Of course," she said. The student took a breath. "What do you hope people remember from today?" Jasmine did not hesitate. She said, "Silence does not always mean safety, and being dignified does not mean staying quiet. Sometimes it means standing up without needing to speak. Other times, it means choosing to speak when it is most difficult, not to prove a point, but to be honest." She smiled, not for photos, but with the look that comes only when you have endured something hard and carried it with strength. Then she walked off the stage. By the next morning, the clip had already made its way online. Not the full panel, just that one moment. Karoline's question, Jasmine's stillness, her mother rising. The reply. It spread not because it was emotional or dramatic, but because it was honest. It was direct. It connected. People rewatched it not for reactions, but to see how Jasmine stayed composed, how her mother did not say much, but said everything, without needing to. Still, the clip could not capture everything. Not the stillness in the room. Not how Karoline's absence lingered louder than her question. Not how Jasmine's words stayed with people long after the screen went black. In Kansas City, a black mother showed the video to her daughter over breakfast. In Albuquerque, a professor played it before class and asked, "What does real respect look like?" In Toledo, a young woman saved the clip as a reminder to hold her ground with calm. This was more than a moment. It became a reflection. Because the truth is, every person has stood on a version of that stage. Everyone has been Jasmine in their own way. And sadly, many have sat still when they heard someone say something wrong. But Jasmine did more than speak up. She gave direction. She did not shame anyone. She did not attack. She simply told the truth and let the space respond. And Althea, her mother, without needing a speech or a title, reminded us all that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand your ground, stay present, and not shrink back. That is the legacy Jasmine drew from. That is the legacy we should aim to build. So here is the question I leave you with. When the moment comes, and it will you stay seated, or will you stand? Will you make a joke to stay comfortable? Or will you listen, really listen, even if what you hear makes you uncomfortable, but helps you grow? Because someone is always watching: a child, a student, someone in the last row. So speak truth, even if your voice is shaky. And when you do not do it for applause. Do it so someone else knows they can speak up too. If this story moved you, pass it on, share it, let someone else hear it. And if you want more honest stories that make you feel, that challenge the way you see things, subscribe. Because the next big moment may not be on a stage. It could happen in your kitchen, at your job, or waiting in line at the store. And when it does, make sure it matters.